The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Adelaide Cottage, casting long shadows across the wooden floors where Catherine sat with her cup of tea, hands trembling slightly as she held the delicate porcelain. 3 months had passed since her final chemotherapy session, and, though the doctors had declared her treatment successful, the weight of uncertainty still pressed heavily on her shoulders. William watched from the doorway, his heart aching as he observed his wife's quiet struggle with the aftermath of her battle. The past year had been unlike anything they had ever experienced together. When Catherine first noticed the persistent fatigue and the subtle changes in her body, she had initially dismissed them as the natural consequences of their demanding royal schedule. Between official engagements, charity work, and raising their 3 children, exhaustion seemed inevitable. But, when the symptoms persisted and her doctor recommended further testing, their world had shifted dramatically. The diagnosis had arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in February, delivered in the sterile environment of a private medical facility in London. Catherine remembered the way the words seemed to hang in the air, heavy and surreal, as the oncologist explained the type of cancer they were dealing with and the treatment options available. William's hand had found hers immediately, his fingers intertwining with hers in a grip that spoke of determination rather than despair. In those first dark hours after receiving the news, they had made crucial decisions about how to handle the situation. The children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, were their primary concern. How do you explain to young minds that their mother is facing something so frightening? They decided to be honest but age-appropriate, emphasizing that Mummy was going to get the best possible care and that they would face this challenge together as a family. The decision to temporarily step back from their royal duties had not been made lightly. William understood the weight of responsibility that came with his position, but he also knew that his wife and family needed him now more than ever. The palace had released a carefully worded statement explaining Catherine's need to focus on her health, while William would be scaling back his engagements to support his family during this difficult time. Those early days of treatment had been a whirlwind of medical appointments, second opinions, and treatment planning. Catherine approached her illness with the same grace and determination she brought to everything else in her life, but William could see the fear lurking behind her brave facade. Late at night, when the children were asleep and the house was quiet, she would sometimes break down, allowing herself to feel the full weight of what she was facing. The chemotherapy sessions were particularly challenging. William would drive her to the hospital, holding her hand during the treatments and staying by her side as the powerful medications worked through her system. He learned to recognize the subtle signs of her discomfort, bringing her favorite books, playing soft music, and simply being present when words weren't enough. The side effects were brutal: the nausea, the exhaustion, the gradual loss of her beautiful hair that had become such an iconic part of her public image. Catherine's decision to cut her hair short before the chemotherapy began was both practical and symbolic. She sat in their bedroom with William beside her, scissors in hand, as they took turns cutting away the long locks that had framed her face for so many years. There were tears, but there was also laughter as William proved to be less skilled with hair styling than with royal protocols. The children had been included in this moment, each of them getting to cut a small section, turning what could have been a devastating experience into something that brought the family closer together. The public's response to Catherine's diagnosis had been overwhelming in its support. Letters and cards arrived daily at Kensington Palace, flowers were left at the gates, and social media overflowed with messages of love and encouragement. The outpouring of affection reminded them both of the deep connection Catherine had forged with people around the world, and it became a source of strength during the darkest moments of her treatment. William found himself taking on new roles within their household, becoming more hands-on with the children's daily routines and school activities. He discovered aspects of parenting that his royal schedule had previously prevented him from fully experiencing. Helping with homework, preparing breakfast, and managing bedtime stories became precious moments that grounded him during the uncertainty of Catherine's treatment. The children showed remarkable resilience throughout this period. George, as the eldest, seemed to understand the gravity of the situation and stepped up to help with his younger siblings. Charlotte demonstrated an impressive emotional intelligence, often sensing when her mother needed extra cuddles or quiet moments together. Louis, in his innocence, continued to bring joy and laughter to the household with his boundless energy and amusing observations about the world around him. Friends and family rallied around them during this time. Catherine's parents, Carol and Michael Middleton, were constant sources of support, helping with childcare and maintaining normalcy in the children's routines. William's father, despite his own health challenges, checked in regularly and offered whatever assistance was needed. The tight-knit group of friends they had cultivated over the years proved invaluable, providing emotional support and practical help without making them feel like objects of pity. As the months progressed and Catherine's treatment continued, they began to see small signs of improvement. Her energy levels started to stabilize, the side effects became more manageable, and, most importantly, the medical tests began showing positive responses to the treatment. Each clean scan felt like a small victory, building toward the larger goal of complete recovery. The couple found new ways to connect during this period, their relationship deepening through shared struggle. They developed rituals around Catherine's treatment days, special teas, favorite movies, and quiet conversations about their hopes for the future. William learned to read her moods and needs in ways he hadn't before, while Catherine discovered new depths to her husband's capacity for caregiving and emotional support. Their faith played an important role in navigating this challenge. Sunday services at the local church became even more meaningful, and they found comfort in the prayers and support of their religious community. The simple act of sitting together in the peaceful environment of the chapel, surrounded by familiar faces and timeless rituals, provided a sense of stability and hope that sustained them through the most difficult periods. The decision to maintain some level of normalcy in their daily lives proved crucial for everyone's mental health. They continued family traditions like movie nights, weekend walks around their property, and special birthday celebrations. These moments reminded them that life continued beyond the cancer diagnosis and treatment, that joy could coexist with struggle. As Catherine's hair began to grow back, soft and slightly different in texture than before, it became a visible symbol of her recovery and resilience. The children delighted in running their fingers through the new growth, marveling at how different it felt and looked. William found himself studying her face in quiet moments, noting how the experience had added new depths to her beauty, not just physical, but the inner strength that radiated from her eyes. The gradual return to public life began with small steps. Catherine's first public appearance after her treatment was at a local charity event close to their home, chosen specifically because it represented causes close to her heart and would be a supportive environment for her return. William watched nervously from the sidelines as she greeted supporters and spoke briefly about her experience, her voice steady but filled with emotion as she thanked everyone for their prayers and support. The response to her return was immediate and overwhelming. People were visibly moved to see her looking healthy and strong, many wiping away tears as she spoke about the importance of cancer research and support for families facing similar challenges. Her authenticity and vulnerability in discussing her experience created an even deeper connection with the public than her previous royal work had achieved. Behind the scenes, Catherine and William were already beginning to plan their fuller return to royal duties. They knew that their experience had changed them both, giving them new perspectives on what truly mattered in life and how they wanted to use their platform going forward. The months of stepping back from public life had provided clarity about their priorities and renewed their sense of purpose in their royal roles. The notification from Catherine's medical team arrived on a crisp autumn morning, 6 months after her final treatment. William found her in the garden, kneeling beside the flower beds they had planted together during her recovery, her hands deep in the rich soil as she tended to the late-blooming roses. The expression on her face when she looked up told him everything he needed to know before she even spoke. The latest scans were completely clear. The cancer was gone. They held each other in the garden for what felt like hours, surrounded by the flowers that had become symbols of hope and renewal during their most challenging year. The relief was overwhelming, but it came with a complexity of emotions neither had fully anticipated. Alongside the joy and gratitude, there was also a strange sense of uncertainty about what came next. For months, their lives had been structured around treatment schedules, medical appointments, and the singular focus of fighting for Catherine's health. Now, they faced the prospect of rebuilding their lives and their royal roles with a completely new perspective. The children's reactions to the news reflected their individual personalities perfectly. George, now more mature after witnessing his mother's strength throughout her treatment, simply nodded solemnly and asked if this meant Mummy wouldn't have to go to the hospital anymore. Charlotte burst into tears of relief and refused to let go of Catherine for the rest of the day. Louis, with the beautiful simplicity of childhood, announced that they should have cake to celebrate, then immediately began planning an elaborate party complete with decorations and games. The palace staff had been preparing for this moment, understanding that Catherine and William's return to full royal duties would need to be carefully managed and thoughtfully planned. Their private secretary had worked with them to identify the causes and organizations that had become most meaningful during their time away, particularly those focused on cancer research, family support services, and mental health advocacy. Catherine's first major engagement back was to visit the oncology ward where she had received her treatment. Walking through those familiar corridors, she was struck by how different the experience felt now. As a patient, she had been focused on getting through each day, each treatment session. Now, returning as someone who had emerged successfully from that battle, she could see the environment through different eyes and understand how her presence might impact others currently fighting similar battles. The conversations she had with other patients and their families were unlike any royal engagement she had ever undertaken. There was an authenticity and depth that came from shared experience, an immediate connection that transcended the usual formalities of royal visits. One young mother, recently diagnosed and terrified about how to explain her illness to her children, broke down in tears when Catherine shared how they had handled similar conversations in their own family. William watched these interactions with a mixture of pride and emotion. He could see how the experience had transformed his wife, adding new layers to her natural empathy and giving her words a weight and authenticity they had never possessed before. The way she could look into someone's eyes and truly understand their fear, having walked that path herself, created connections that went far beyond traditional royal duties. Their approach to royal engagements began to shift significantly. Where they had once focused primarily on ceremonial duties and traditional charitable work, they now sought out opportunities to use their platform for deeper impact. Catherine became particularly passionate about supporting research into early detection methods for cancer, understanding how crucial timely diagnosis could be in treatment outcomes. The couple decided to establish a new foundation focused specifically on supporting families affected by serious illness. The planning process brought them closer together as they worked late into the evening, discussing how to structure programs that would provide both practical and emotional support. William's organizational skills complemented Catherine's intuitive understanding of what families needed most during medical crises. Their first major public appearance together after Catherine's recovery was at a gala supporting cancer research. The event had been planned for months, but their attendance had remained uncertain until the final medical clearance came through. Catherine chose to wear a midnight blue gown that complemented the new texture and color of her hair, which had grown back slightly darker and with more curl than before. The moment they appeared together at the top of the stairs leading into the venue, the entire room fell silent. Then, spontaneously, applause began. It started with a few people near the entrance and rippled throughout the ballroom until everyone was standing and clapping. Many guests were openly crying, moved by seeing Catherine looking radiant and healthy after such a public battle. Catherine's speech that evening was perhaps the most personal she had ever delivered in a royal capacity. She spoke about the fear that comes with a cancer diagnosis, the importance of family support, and the incredible advances in treatment that had made her recovery possible. Her voice wavered slightly when she mentioned the other patients she had met during treatment who were still fighting their battles, but she maintained her composure as she spoke about the responsibility they all shared to support continued research and patient care. The fundraising total for that single evening exceeded all expectations, But, more importantly, Catherine and William could see how their personal experience had given new meaning and urgency to their philanthropic work. Donors weren't just supporting a worthy cause, they were investing in something that had personally affected people they cared about. Behind the scenes, their relationship with the media had also evolved. The press coverage during Catherine's illness had been largely respectful, with most outlets honoring their request for privacy during treatment. Now, as they returned to public life, there was a different quality to the attention they received. Photographers seemed more thoughtful in their approach, and journalists asked more meaningful questions about their advocacy work rather than focusing solely on fashion or ceremonial aspects of their appearances. The children had also been affected by their parents' experience in ways that became apparent as they returned to more normal routines. They showed increased empathy toward others, particularly classmates who were dealing with family difficulties. George had become protective of his mother in a way that was both touching and concerning to his parents, who worked to reassure him that she was truly well while acknowledging his feelings. Charlotte had developed an interest in helping others that manifested in small but significant ways. She began asking to donate toys to charity and insisted on visiting elderly residents at a local care facility with her grandmother. Louis, while still very much an energetic young boy, showed surprising sensitivity when meeting people who seemed sad or worried. The family's private time together had become more intentional and precious. Weekend activities were planned with more care, and they made conscious efforts to create lasting memories. Catherine and William had both realized how quickly circumstances could change and how important it was to fully experience and appreciate the good moments. Their professional partnership had also deepened. William had always admired his wife's natural ability to connect with people, but watching her courage throughout her illness and seeing how she transformed that experience into meaningful advocacy work elevated his respect for her to new levels. He began deferring to her judgment more often on matters related to their charitable work and public engagements. Catherine, in turn, had gained new appreciation for William's steady strength and reliability. During her most vulnerable moments, he had been exactly the partner she needed, present without being overwhelming, supportive without being patronizing, strong without dismissing her own strength. Their marriage had been tested in ways they never anticipated and had emerged more solid than before. The logistics of managing their return to full royal duties proved complex. Their staff had to coordinate with numerous organizations that had been affected by their reduced schedule, rearranging postponed engagements and integrating new priorities into their calendar. The demand for their attendance at events had actually increased during their absence, as organizations recognized the added value their presence brought after their personal experience with serious illness. International engagements required particular consideration. Catherine's doctors had cleared her for travel, but they were cautious about overscheduling during her first year back. The palace worked with foreign offices to ensure that planned trips would be manageable and would include appropriate medical support if needed. Their first overseas trip together after Catherine's recovery was to a Commonwealth nation where they would focus specifically on healthcare initiatives. The symbolism was intentional. They wanted their return to international duties to reflect their new priorities and demonstrate their commitment to using their experience to benefit others. As autumn progressed into winter, Catherine and William settled into their new rhythm of royal duties. Each engagement felt more purposeful than before, informed by a deeper understanding of vulnerability, resilience, and the preciousness of health and family. They approached their roles with renewed energy and a clarity of mission that impressed both their staff and the organizations they supported. The transformation in their approach to royal duty was becoming apparent to everyone around them. Where they had once sometimes seemed to be going through the motions of traditional royal obligations, they now brought an intensity and authenticity that made every engagement more meaningful. Their experience had given them a new understanding of what their platform could accomplish when used with genuine purpose and personal investment. The early morning call from Buckingham Palace came on a Wednesday in November, just as Catherine was reviewing plans for a series of hospital visits scheduled for the following month. William answered the phone in his study, and she could hear the change in his voice from the next room. The king had decided to expand their roles significantly, recognizing how their recent experience had not only strengthened them personally but had also enhanced their ability to connect with people facing life's greatest challenges. Catherine found William standing by the window after he ended the call, his expression thoughtful and slightly overwhelmed. The proposal was substantial. They would be taking on patronage of several major healthcare organizations, spearheading a new royal initiative on family support during medical crises, and representing the crown at important international summits focused on global health challenges. It was both an honor and a recognition of how much they had grown through their recent trials. The weight of increased responsibility felt different than it had in their earlier royal careers. Before Catherine's illness, taking on new duties had sometimes felt like obligations to be fulfilled with competence and grace. Now, these new roles felt like opportunities to make meaningful differences in areas where they had genuine expertise and deep personal investment. Their first major challenge came with the annual state banquet season. Catherine had always excelled at these formal occasions, but returning to such high-profile public events after her treatment brought unexpected anxiety. The prospect of being photographed extensively, analyzed by fashion commentators, and scrutinized by international media felt daunting after months of privacy and recovery. The week before the first banquet, Catherine stood in front of her mirror trying on the gown that had been selected months earlier. The dress, a stunning emerald creation that had been chosen to complement the evening's diplomatic significance, no longer fit quite the same way. Her body had changed during treatment, not dramatically, but enough that she felt different in her own skin. William found her sitting on their bed, looking uncertain in a way he hadn't seen since the early days of her diagnosis. They talked honestly about her concerns, acknowledging that returning to the public would require rebuilding her confidence in some ways. Together, they decided to approach the evening not as a performance to be perfect, but as an opportunity to demonstrate that strength and grace could coexist with vulnerability and real human experience. The state banquet exceeded all their expectations. Catherine's presence seemed to add new depth to the traditional ceremonial aspects of the evening. When she spoke with visiting dignitaries about their country's healthcare systems and challenges, her questions showed a sophisticated understanding that came from personal experience with medical care. Her conversations were more substantive and engaging than the polite exchanges that typically characterized such events. One particular moment from that evening would be remembered for years to come. The visiting head of state's spouse confided in Catherine about their own family member's recent cancer diagnosis, seeking advice about managing the emotional impact on their children. Catherine's response, delivered quietly but overheard by nearby guests, was so genuine and practical that it moved several people to tears. The exchange demonstrated how her personal experience had given her new tools for connecting with others in meaningful ways. The success of that evening gave Catherine renewed confidence, but, more importantly, it showed both her and William how they could integrate their personal growth into their royal duties without compromising either their authenticity or their effectiveness in formal settings. They began to see possibilities for bringing the same depth to other traditional royal functions. Their approach to overseas visits underwent a complete transformation. Where they had once focused primarily on cultural exchanges and traditional diplomacy, they now sought opportunities to learn about innovative healthcare programs and family support systems in other countries. Their upcoming tour of Scandinavian countries was redesigned to include visits to cutting-edge cancer research facilities and family support centers. The planning process for international trips became more collaborative than it had ever been. Catherine and William worked closely with their advance teams to ensure that each engagement would provide opportunities for meaningful learning and exchange rather than just ceremonial obligations. They wanted to return from each trip with new ideas and connections that could benefit their work at home. Their children had become more involved in understanding their parents' work, asking thoughtful questions about the places they would visit and the people they would meet. George, in particular, showed interest in the medical research aspects of their engagements, once surprising his parents by asking detailed questions about how new cancer treatments were developed. The family dinners had become forums for discussing their shared mission in ways appropriate for the children's ages. Catherine and William made conscious efforts to explain how their royal duties connected to helping real people solve real problems, making their work more concrete and meaningful for their children than traditional explanations of royal obligation might have been. One of their most significant new undertakings was the establishment of residential support facilities for families dealing with serious illnesses. Catherine had experienced firsthand how isolating medical treatment could be, especially for families who lived far from major medical centers. The idea of creating comfortable, supportive environments where families could stay together during extended treatment periods became a passionate focus for both of them. The process of developing these facilities required Catherine and William to work with architects, healthcare professionals, and family advocates in ways they had never done before. They insisted on being involved in every detail, from the color schemes chosen to promote calm and healing to the layout of common areas that would encourage interaction between families facing similar challenges. Their hands-on approach sometimes surprised the professionals they worked with, but it also impressed them. Catherine's questions about room layouts came from her memory of spending long nights in hospital chairs, while William's concerns about privacy and security reflected his understanding of how public attention could intrude on private medical moments. The first facility was planned to open the following spring, and advance reservations were already being taken. The response from both medical professionals and patient advocacy groups had been overwhelmingly positive, with many organizations offering to partner with the initiative or replicate it in other regions. As winter approached, Catherine and William faced their first Christmas season back in full royal duties. The traditional celebrations would be more elaborate than the quiet, family-focused holiday they had shared during Catherine's treatment, but they were determined to maintain the deeper appreciation for togetherness that their recent experience had fostered. The Christmas engagement schedule included several new events focused on supporting families affected by illness during the holiday season. Catherine had specifically requested these additions, understanding how difficult the holidays could be for people dealing with medical challenges. The idea was to bring some royal Christmas magic to hospital wards and treatment centers. Their first visit was to a children's cancer ward where Catherine had received some of her treatment. Walking into the decorated pediatric unit alongside costumed characters and carrying specially selected gifts, she was struck by how different the experience felt from her perspective as a patient. The children's faces lit up with excitement, and their parents showed gratitude that went beyond appreciation for a charitable visit. William watched his wife interact with young patients and their families with a new understanding of her capabilities. Her ability to provide comfort and hope wasn't just theoretical anymore, it was based on genuine understanding of what these families were experiencing. When she told a worried mother that it was possible to maintain family normalcy during treatment, her words carried weight because everyone knew she had lived that truth. The media coverage of these holiday visits captured something different than typical royal Christmas stories. The photographs showed genuine emotion and connection rather than ceremonial pleasantness. Catherine's expressions of understanding when listening to families' concerns were authentic because her empathy was rooted in shared experience. One particularly moving moment occurred during a visit to a facility for elderly patients spending Christmas away from their families due to medical needs. An elderly gentleman, recognizing Catherine despite her changed appearance since her illness, asked quietly if she was feeling well. When she assured him that she was fully recovered, he smiled and said he had been praying for her every day since her diagnosis became public. The exchange reminded both Catherine and William of the personal connections they had formed with people throughout the country during their most difficult period. Thousands of individuals had been following her journey, celebrating her recovery as if she were a member of their own family. This realization brought new weight to their understanding of their public roles and responsibilities. Their approach to New Year planning reflected their evolved priorities. Instead of focusing primarily on social events and ceremonial obligations, they were planning a year that would be structured around meaningful opportunities to advance their healthcare advocacy work. The calendar their staff presented to them looked different than any previous year's schedule, with longer dedicated periods for in-depth engagements and more collaboration with research institutions. They had learned to protect their family time more fiercely than before, understanding that their personal well-being was essential not only for their own happiness but for their effectiveness in their royal roles. The schedule included regular periods of private family time that would not be compromised for additional engagements, no matter how prestigious or important they might seem. As the year drew to a close, Catherine and William reflected on how profoundly their lives and their approach to their royal duties had changed. The cancer diagnosis and treatment that had initially seemed like such a devastating interruption to their lives had actually redirected them toward work that felt more meaningful and impactful than anything they had done before. They were approaching the new year with renewed purpose and clear understanding of how they wanted to use their platform to benefit others. The new year brought an unexpected invitation that would test Catherine and William's readiness to take on truly prominent monarchy roles. The Commonwealth Health Ministers' Conference, typically attended by government officials and medical professionals, had extended a special invitation for them to serve as keynote speakers and participate in policy discussions. The request acknowledged their unique perspective as both royal representatives and individuals who had navigated serious illness within the constraints and privileges of public life. Catherine's initial reaction was a mixture of honor and apprehension. Speaking to government ministers and health officials about policy matters was far beyond the traditional scope of royal duties, which typically focused on ceremonial roles and charity patronage. However, her experience over the past year had given her insights into healthcare systems that few people in her position could offer. William encouraged her to accept the invitation, recognizing that this could be the beginning of a new type of royal influence, one based on expertise and experience rather than just tradition and ceremony. Together, they began preparing for what would essentially be Catherine's debut as a thought leader in healthcare policy, a role that would have been unimaginable before her illness. The preparation process was intensive and unlike anything in their previous royal training. Catherine spent weeks meeting with healthcare policy experts, reviewing international best practices for family support during medical treatment, and developing a deep understanding of healthcare funding and resource allocation. Her questions during these briefings showed sophisticated thinking about systemic improvements rather than just charitable interventions. William supported her preparation while also developing his own expertise in areas where he could contribute meaningfully. His focus became the intersection of mental health support and serious illness, recognizing how his role as a caregiver had given him insights into the emotional challenges faced by family members during medical crises. Their children watched their parents' preparation with curiosity and pride. George began asking questions about different countries' healthcare systems after overhearing his parents' discussions. Charlotte showed interest in the idea that her mother's experience could help other families, while Louis remained largely focused on when his parents would be traveling and whether he could come along. The week before the conference, Catherine received a personal letter from a woman whose daughter had been diagnosed with the same type of cancer during the same period as Catherine's treatment. The mother described how following Catherine's journey had given her family hope and practical ideas for maintaining normalcy during treatment. The letter reinforced Catherine's understanding of how her public role could be used to support others facing similar challenges. The Commonwealth Conference took place in a modern facility designed to facilitate collaborative discussion rather than formal presentations. Catherine and William arrived having prepared not just speeches, but also detailed proposals for new international collaboration on family support services and research funding coordination. Catherine's keynote address was perhaps the most substantive speech she had ever delivered. Rather than focusing on personal narrative, she presented a comprehensive analysis of gaps in current healthcare support systems and specific recommendations for addressing them. Her proposals were grounded in research but illustrated with insights that could only come from personal experience. The audience's response exceeded all expectations. Healthcare ministers who had initially been skeptical about the value of royal participation found themselves taking detailed notes on Catherine's recommendations. Her suggestion for creating international standards for family support services during medical treatment sparked immediate discussion about pilot programs and funding mechanisms. William's presentation on mental health support for families drew equally strong reactions. His analysis of how caregivers' mental health affected patient outcomes was both personally informed and professionally sophisticated. Several ministers approached him afterward to discuss implementing similar support programs in their own countries. The private discussions that followed their presentations were even more significant than their public remarks. Catherine and William found themselves in serious policy conversations with health officials who treated them as knowledgeable colleagues rather than ceremonial guests. These interactions represented a fundamental shift in how their royal roles could function within important global discussions. One particularly meaningful conversation occurred with the health minister from a developing nation who was struggling to provide adequate family support services with limited resources. Catherine's suggestions for low-cost but high-impact interventions, based on her observation of what had been most helpful during her own treatment, provided practical solutions that could be implemented immediately. The conference coverage in international media focused not on fashion or royal protocol, but on the substance of Catherine and William's contributions to healthcare policy discussions. Commentary pieces analyzed their proposals and assessed their potential impact on international health initiatives. This type of substantive coverage represented a new chapter in how their royal work would be perceived and evaluated. Returning home from the conference, Catherine and William felt a new confidence about their ability to contribute meaningfully to important issues beyond traditional royal spheres. The positive response from healthcare professionals and government officials had validated their decision to use their platform for deeper impact rather than just ceremonial appearances. Their success at the conference led to additional invitations to participate in international policy discussions. Within weeks, they received requests to address medical research funding conferences, family advocacy summits, and healthcare innovation gatherings. The demand for their participation was based on recognition of their genuine expertise rather than just their royal status. The increased prominence of their roles required adjustments to their staff and support systems. They needed advisors who could help them navigate complex policy discussions and maintain their credibility as informed contributors to important debates. The palace worked with them to identify experts who could serve as ongoing consultants and help them stay current with developments in their areas of focus. Their children's understanding of their parents' work evolved as Catherine and William took on these more substantial roles. Family conversations began including discussions of international healthcare challenges and potential solutions, giving the children a sophisticated understanding of how their parents' position could be used to address real-world problems. The spring opening of their first family support residential facility provided an opportunity to demonstrate the practical application of the policy ideas they had been developing. The facility incorporated design principles and program elements that had emerged from their international discussions, creating a model that could be studied and potentially replicated in other locations. The opening ceremony was attended by healthcare professionals from several countries who had met Catherine and William at various conferences. The event became an informal continuation of policy discussions, with visitors sharing ideas about adapting the facility's innovations to different cultural and resource contexts. Catherine's role as the facility's primary royal patron gave her ongoing opportunities to refine her understanding of family support needs and develop new ideas for addressing them. Her regular visits to the facility weren't just ceremonial, they included meetings with staff about program effectiveness and discussions with families about their experiences and suggestions for improvements. William's involvement in the facility's mental health support programs provided similar opportunities for practical learning and policy development. His interactions with family members dealing with caregiving stress informed his broader advocacy work and helped him develop more nuanced understanding of how support systems could be improved. The summer brought their first major international tour since Catherine's recovery, planned around a series of healthcare conferences and facility visits in 3 countries. The tour represented a new model for royal international engagement, focused on substantive learning and collaboration rather than primarily ceremonial or cultural exchange activities. The advance planning for this tour was more complex than previous trips because it required coordination with medical institutions and policy organizations rather than just government protocol offices. Catherine and William insisted on having adequate time at each location to engage in meaningful discussions and learning rather than rushing through symbolic appearances. Their first stop was at a research institution known for innovative cancer treatment approaches. Catherine's visit included private meetings with researchers working on treatment methods that could benefit future patients, as well as public discussions about the importance of research funding and international collaboration. The research facility visit demonstrated how Catherine's royal platform could support scientific advancement in ways beyond traditional charity patronage. Her informed questions about research methodologies and potential applications showed genuine understanding, while her public endorsement of specific research priorities could influence funding decisions and policy support. William's parallel engagements at mental health facilities and family support centers provided similar opportunities to advance important work through substantive involvement rather than just ceremonial endorsement. His discussions with professionals working in these areas continued to inform his understanding and helped him develop more sophisticated approaches to advocacy and policy support. The international tour's success was measured not just by positive media coverage or successful diplomatic outcomes, but by concrete commitments from host countries to adopt new programs and collaborative initiatives that had emerged from Catherine and William's visits. This type of measurable impact represented a new standard for evaluating the effectiveness of their royal work. As autumn returned, marking 2 years since Catherine's final treatment, she stood in the same garden where William had found her when they received the news of her complete recovery. The roses she had planted during her treatment were now mature and blooming magnificently, their deep red petals a testament to growth through adversity. The metaphor was not lost on either of them as they reflected on how profoundly their lives and their roles within the monarchy had transformed. The invitation that arrived that morning represented the culmination of their journey back to prominence. The United Nations had requested that Catherine deliver the opening address at the World Health Assembly, making her the first member of the British royal family to address this prestigious gathering of global health leaders. The invitation acknowledged not just her royal status, but her recognized expertise in healthcare advocacy and family support systems. William found Catherine in the study later that evening, surrounded by research documents and policy papers as she prepared for what would undoubtedly be the most significant speech of her royal career. The address would reach health ministers and policymakers from every nation, potentially influencing global healthcare priorities and resource allocation for years to come. Their preparation for the UN address involved consultations with leading healthcare experts from around the world. Catherine's approach had evolved far beyond personal storytelling to encompass sophisticated policy analysis and evidence-based recommendations. Her speech would present a comprehensive framework for integrating family support into healthcare systems globally, backed by research data and successful pilot programs. The week before the address, Catherine and William hosted a private dinner at Kensington Palace for healthcare policy experts, patient advocates, and medical researchers who had contributed to her understanding of global health challenges. The conversation around their dinner table was unlike any previous royal entertaining, focusing on complex policy discussions rather than ceremonial pleasantries. Dr. Sarah Chen, a leading oncology researcher who had become one of Catherine's key advisors, later remarked that the evening represented a new model for how royal influence could support scientific and policy advancement. The gathering produced concrete collaborative commitments and research partnerships that would extend far beyond the UN address itself. Their children had grown into their parents' evolved roles with remarkable adaptability. George, now old enough to understand the significance of his mother's UN invitation, helped her practice portions of her speech and offered thoughtful feedback about clarity and impact. His questions demonstrated sophisticated understanding of global health challenges that reflected the substantive dinner conversations he had been exposed to over the past months. Charlotte had developed a particular interest in the healthcare advocacy work, often asking to accompany her parents on facility visits and charity engagements. Her natural empathy, combined with her exposure to meaningful work from an early age, was shaping her into someone who would likely pursue substantive humanitarian roles in her own future. Louis, while still very much a young child, had absorbed the family's commitment to helping others in ways that emerged in his play and interactions with friends. His teachers noted his unusual sensitivity to classmates who were dealing with family difficulties and his instinct to find ways to help and support them. The flight to New York for the UN address felt different from previous international travel. Rather than the mixture of excitement and obligation that had characterized earlier royal tours, Catherine felt a deep sense of purpose and responsibility. She was carrying not just her own story and insights, but the hopes and experiences of countless families who had shared their struggles with her over the past 2 years. William's pride in his wife's transformation was evident to everyone around them. He had watched her evolve from a cancer patient fighting for her life to a recognized thought leader in global health policy, and the journey had strengthened his own understanding of how their royal platform could be used for maximum positive impact. The UN headquarters buzzed with anticipation as delegates from around the world gathered for Catherine's address. Her reputation for substantive, well-researched presentations had preceded her, and many attendees were genuinely curious to hear her policy recommendations rather than expecting traditional royal remarks about the importance of charitable giving. Catherine's entrance into the General Assembly Hall was met with respectful applause, but the atmosphere was professional rather than ceremonial. She was being received as a policy expert who happened to hold royal titles, rather than as royalty making a charitable appearance. This distinction represented the successful transformation of her public role. Her opening remarks immediately established the serious tone and substantial content that would characterize the entire address. Rather than beginning with personal narrative or traditional royal expressions of honor at being invited, she launched directly into analysis of current gaps in global healthcare support systems and the economic and human costs of these deficiencies. The heart of her presentation focused on 5 specific policy recommendations for integrating family support into healthcare systems worldwide. Each recommendation was supported by research data, pilot program results, and economic analysis demonstrating both the humanitarian and financial benefits of implementation. Her proposals were detailed enough to serve as frameworks for immediate policy development. The audience's engagement was immediately apparent. Delegates took extensive notes, and several requested copies of her supporting documentation before she had even finished speaking. The questions that followed her presentation demonstrated that health ministers and policy experts were treating her recommendations as serious contributions to international health policy rather than ceremonial remarks. One particularly significant moment occurred when the health minister from a major developing nation asked for specific guidance on implementing family support programs with limited resources. Catherine's response, drawing on examples from successful low-resource implementations she had studied, provided immediately actionable advice that could impact healthcare delivery for millions of people. The media coverage of her UN address marked a complete transformation in how Catherine's public work was perceived and reported. International news outlets focused on the substance of her policy recommendations and their potential global impact, rather than on royal protocol or fashion choices. Commentary pieces analyzed her proposals from healthcare policy perspectives and assessed their feasibility for implementation across different healthcare systems. The week following her UN address brought a flood of invitations to participate in healthcare policy conferences, serve on international advisory committees, and collaborate with research institutions around the world. The recognition of her expertise had opened doors to influence that extended far beyond traditional royal spheres. Back home, Catherine and William began planning how to manage the increased demands on their time while maintaining their commitment to family life and their existing royal responsibilities. The success of Catherine's UN address had created opportunities for impact that they felt obligated to pursue, but they were determined not to sacrifice the family stability that had been crucial to their resilience during difficult times. Their approach to these new opportunities was strategic and selective. They established criteria for evaluating invitations based on potential for meaningful impact rather than prestige or visibility. This meant sometimes declining high-profile events in favor of smaller gatherings where their contributions could lead to concrete policy changes or program implementations. The establishment of their International Healthcare Advocacy Foundation provided a structure for managing their expanding work while ensuring sustainable impact. The foundation would coordinate their international engagements, support research initiatives, and facilitate collaboration between healthcare organizations across different countries. Catherine's role as the Foundation's primary spokesperson gave her a platform for continued policy advocacy that complemented rather than competed with her royal duties. William's focus on mental health aspects of healthcare created a natural partnership that leveraged both their expertise and their public platforms effectively. As they approached the second anniversary of Catherine's recovery, their transformation was complete, but their work was just beginning. They had successfully evolved from traditional royal figures fulfilling ceremonial obligations to recognized thought leaders in global healthcare policy, while maintaining the authentic connection with people that had always been Catherine's greatest strength. The garden where they had celebrated Catherine's recovery was now the site of regular informal meetings with healthcare advocates, researchers, and policy experts from around the world. Their home had become a place where significant healthcare initiatives were conceived and developed, representing a new model for how royal residences could serve as centers for meaningful work. Their children were growing up understanding that privilege and position carried responsibilities for service that went beyond ceremony and tradition. The family dinners that had become policy discussions during Catherine's treatment preparation continued to be learning experiences for all of them, but now the children contributed their own insights and ideas rather than just listening to adult conversations. The roses in their garden bloomed more beautifully each year, their deep roots and careful tending producing flowers of exceptional beauty and resilience. Catherine often used them as metaphors in her speeches about recovery and growth, noting how the most beautiful blooms often came from plants that had weathered difficult seasons. Looking toward the future, Catherine and William saw their roles continuing to evolve as they gained experience and credibility in healthcare advocacy. The platform they had built through personal experience, careful study, and authentic engagement gave them tools for influence that previous generations of royals had never possessed. Their story had become one of transformation through adversity, demonstrating how personal challenge could be channeled into public service that created lasting positive impact. They had not just returned to prominence within the monarchy, they had redefined what prominence could mean and how it could be used to address the world's most pressing healthcare challenges. The cancer diagnosis that had once threatened to disrupt their lives and royal service had instead become the catalyst for a new kind of royal influence, one based on expertise, authenticity, and deep commitment to solving real problems for real people. Their journey back to prominent monarchy roles had taken them far beyond where they had started, to a place of greater purpose and more meaningful impact than they had ever imagined possible.